stars stretched across the view screen like diamonds scattered on black cloth. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Harmony's edge, watching another peaceful day pass in human space. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman in her late 30s, wearing the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. No medals. No military insignia, just a small patch showing a dove carrying an olive branch. That was how humans liked it now. Peaceful. Quiet. Boring. Some would say. The year was 2847, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Concordat for 200 years. It was a good arrangement. Humans traded their technology and helped other species terraform dead worlds into living ones. In return, they got protection, trade routes, and a seat at the table where the big decisions were made. Elena's first officer, a young man named Marcus Chen, walked up beside her. He held a datapad in his hands. "Commander, we're receiving the weekly reports from the Concordat Council," he said. Elena nodded and took the pad. She scrolled through the usual information. Trade agreements, border disputes between the Vrax Dominion and the Kryn swarms, technology exchanges with the Luminar Collective. Nothing unusual. The Vrax were a species of large reptilian creatures who controlled nearly a third of known space. They were aggressive, territorial, and believed that might made right. The Kryn were insectoids who lived in massive hive ships, always expanding, always hungry for resources. The Luminar were beings made of living crystal who valued logic and mathematics above all else. And then there were humans. The peaceful ones. The diplomats. The builders. Elena remembered her history classes from the academy. Earth's past was violent. Wars that killed millions. Weapons that could crack planets. Colonies fighting against each other for decades. But that was 300 years ago, before the Great Reformation. Humanity had looked at itself in the mirror and decided to change. They put down their weapons. They built hospitals instead of battleships. They chose peace. Most species in the galaxy respected that. Some even admired it, but others, like the Vrax, saw it as weakness. "Commander," Marcus said, interrupting her thoughts. "There's something odd here. One of our colonies, New Terra, missed its weekly check-in." Elena frowned. New Terra was a farming colony on the edge of human space. 400,000 people lived there, growing food that fed a dozen worlds. "Has this happened before?" she asked, once, about 5 years ago. It was just a communications array that broke down. "Set a course for New Terra," Elena ordered. "We'll check it out ourselves." The journey took 3 days. During that time, Elena tried not to worry. Equipment failed sometimes. That was normal. But something in her gut told her this was different. When they arrived at New Terra, Elena knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. The orbital stations were dark. No lights, no power signatures. The planet's surface showed fires burning in several locations. The agricultural zones that should have been green and thriving were blackened. "Get me a detailed scan," Elena said, her voice tight. The science officer worked quickly. When she looked up, her face was pale. "Commander, I'm detecting massive structural damage to all major settlements, and I'm reading energy weapon signatures. Lots of them, energy weapons." That meant military action. But who would attack a farming colony? "Life signs?" Elena asked, though she already feared the answer. "Very few, Commander. Maybe a few hundred scattered across the planet, out of 400,000. The bridge went silent. Elena felt ice settle into her stomach. "Prepare a shuttle," she said quietly. "I'm going down there." The shuttle descended through clouds thick with smoke. When they landed near what used to be New Terra's capital city, Elena stepped out onto broken ground. Buildings lay in ruins. The streets were empty except for debris and bodies. So many bodies. Elena's team spread out searching for survivors. She walked through the devastation, trying to understand what had happened here. The damage was systematic, deliberate. The farming equipment had been destroyed. The water treatment plants bombed. Even the schools and hospitals had been targeted. This wasn't a battle. This was a massacre. "Commander," one of her team members called out. "We found survivors!" Elena ran toward the voice. In a collapsed basement, they found 12 people huddled together. They were injured, traumatized, barely able to speak, but they could tell her what happened. "It was the Vrax," an older woman said, her voice shaking. "They came without warning. Their ships just appeared in orbit and started firing. We tried to surrender, but they didn't care. They came down to the surface and hunted us. Like we were animals. Like it was sport. Elena felt something cold and hard forming in her chest. She helped the survivors into the shuttle and returned to her ship. Back on the Harmony's edge, she sent an immediate message to Earth and to the Concordat Council. Then she sat in her quarters, staring at the reports, at the images, at the death toll. 400,000 people. Dead. For what? For territory? For resources? For entertainment? Elena had been raised on the principles of peace. She had dedicated her life to diplomacy, to finding solutions without violence. She believed in the system, in the rules, in the law, but as she looked at the empty eyes of New Terra's survivors, as she read the reports of children deliberately targeted, of families murdered for sport, something changed inside her. Humanity had chosen peace 200 years ago. They had put away their weapons and their anger. They had become the quiet ones, the diplomatic ones, the civilized ones. But Elena remembered something her grandmother had told her once, a woman who had lived through the tail end of the old days. Peace, her grandmother had said, is not the absence of the capacity for violence. It is the choice not to use it. And that choice can always be unmade. Elena stared out at the stars and waited for Earth's response. She did not know yet that this moment, this massacre on a quiet farming world, would change everything. The galaxy was about to learn that there was a difference between weakness and restraint, and they were about to find out what happened when you pushed too far. The Concordat Council chamber was a marvel of architecture. Built on the neutral moon of Axios, it brought together representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy. The chamber was circular, with seats arranged in tiers so that no one species sat above another. It was designed to be a place of equals. Elena stood in the center of the chamber in the speaker's circle. Around her sat hundreds of delegates from dozens of worlds. The Vrax delegation occupied a large section to her left, their reptilian forms lounging in specially built chairs. The Supreme Regent himself was present, a massive creature with scales that shimmered like oil and eyes that held nothing but contempt. She had come here seeking justice. She would leave having lost her faith in the system. The evidence is clear, Elena said, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. The Vrax Dominion attacked New Terra without provocation. They killed 400,000 civilians, not soldiers, not combatants, farmers, teachers, children. She activated the holographic display. Images filled the air above her. Destroyed schools, burned hospitals, the faces of the dead. We have survivor testimony, she continued. We have ship signatures. We have energy weapon analysis that matches Vrax military technology. This was not an accident. This was not collateral damage. This was deliberate extermination. The chamber was silent as the delegates watched the images. Elena saw some of them look away. Others whispered to their assistants. But she also saw something that made her stomach turn. Some were bored. Some were checking their data pads. Some simply did not care. The Supreme Regent of the Vrax rose from his seat. When he spoke, his voice was deep and rumbling, translated by the chamber's systems into every language. The human speaks of provocation, he said, but she fails to mention that New Terra was established in a disputed zone. The Vrax Dominion has claimed that sector for 300 years. That claim was never recognized by the Concordat, Elena shot back. New Terra was legally established under Concordat Charter Number. Legality, the Supreme Regent interrupted, is a matter of interpretation. In power, the humans came to a region we controlled. They built their colony on land we needed. What did they expect would happen? Elena felt her hands clench into fists. Around the chamber, other delegates began to speak. A luminar representative, her crystalline form refracting light into rainbow patterns, spoke in a voice like chimes. The mathematics of territorial law are complex. While the human claim has merit, so does the Vrax claim. Perhaps we should examine the historical precedents. A Kryn hive speaker, speaking with the collective voice of thousands, clicked its mandibles. Resource allocation in contested zones has always been determined by military presence. The humans had no military presence. The Vrax did. The outcome was logical. Elena could not believe what she was hearing. They were debating technicalities while 400,000 bodies lay cold on New Terra. This is not about territory, she said, her voice rising. This is about mass murder. The Vrax did not simply take the colony. They exterminated it. They hunted civilians for sport. They targeted schools where children were learning. They tortured people for entertainment. Is that legal under any interpretation of concordant law? The chamber fell silent again. The Supreme Regent smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. The human exaggerates, he said smoothly. War is unpleasant. Casualties happen. If the colonists had surrendered immediately instead of resisting, fewer would have died. They did surrender, Elena shouted. We have recordings. They broadcast surrender on every frequency within minutes of your attack. Your forces ignored it and continued killing. The head of the Concordant Council, an ancient being from a species long devoted to neutrality, raised one appendage for silence. The council has reviewed the evidence, the head counselor said. While we find the actions of the Vrax Dominion to be regrettable, we cannot definitively prove that they violated concordant law. The territorial dispute creates ambiguity. Therefore, we propose the following resolution. The Vrax Dominion will pay reparations to the human government in the amount of 50 million credits. In return, the humans will acknowledge the Vrax claim to the new Terra sector. 50 million credits. Elena did the math quickly in her head. That worked out to about 125 credits per murdered civilian. Less than the cost of a decent meal. This is justice? She asked, her voice cold. This is compromise, the head counselor replied. This is how civilization functions. We find middle ground. We avoid further conflict. By rewarding genocide, by accepting reality, the Supreme Regent said. Your species is weak, human. You have no military. You have no power. You exist in this galaxy because we allow you to exist. You trade your technology for our protection. That is the agreement. But protection has limits. If you venture into dangerous places, do not be surprised when danger finds you. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Elena. Accept the reparations, he continued. Be grateful we are offering anything at all. And learn your place in the order of things. The strong rule. The weak submit. That is the law of nature. That is the law of the galaxy. Around the chamber, Elena saw nods of agreement. The other species were not going to help. They were not going to stand up for what was right. They were going to side with power, as they always had. The Kryn delegate spoke again. The humans should consider themselves fortunate. Many species have been completely absorbed by the Vrax. At least humanity still exists. Perhaps they should focus on gratitude rather than demands. Laughter rippled through parts of the chamber. Actually laughed at her. At the deaths of 400,000 people. Elena stood in the speaker's circle surrounded by the representatives of 100 worlds and felt utterly alone. She had come here believing in justice, believing in civilization, believing in law, but there was no justice here. Only power. Only the strong taking what they wanted from the weak. She thought about the survivors she had pulled from the rubble on New Terra, the old woman who had watched her grandchildren die, the young man who had lost his entire family, the girl who could not stop shaking, who flinched at every sound, and she thought about her grandmother's words. About peace being a choice, Commander Vasquez, the head counselor said. Do you accept the council's resolution on behalf of the human government? Elena looked around the chamber one last time. At the Vrax, smugly confident in their power. At the Luminar, coldly calculating the mathematics of suffering. At the Kryn, seeing everything through the lens of resources and territory. At all the others who simply did not care. She opened a secure channel to Earth on her personal communicator. She spoke one word, a code phrase that had not been used in 200 years. Prometheus. Then she looked back at the council and spoke clearly, her voice carrying to every delegate in the chamber. No, she said, we do not accept. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Concordant effective immediately. We will seek our own justice. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted questions. The head counselor called for order. The Supreme Regent laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Your own justice? He said. With what? Your merchant ships? Your farming equipment? You have no weapons, human. You have no warriors. What will you do? Send angry messages? File complaints? Elena turned and walked toward the exit. As she reached the door, she looked back one final time. You're right about one thing, she said quietly. The strong make the rules. And you're about to learn something that we learned a long time ago. Peace is not weakness. And sometimes mercy is mistaken for inability. She left the chamber. Behind her, the delegates returned to their debates, already forgetting about the humans and their complaints. They were, after all, just the weak ones, the peaceful ones, the harmless ones. They would remember this day. They would remember it for centuries, but by then it would be far too late. The message reached Earth 36 hours after Elena spoke the code word. Prometheus, the mythical titan who brought fire to humanity. The signal that meant diplomacy had failed and stronger measures were required. In a bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps, lights that had been dark for 2 centuries flickered to life. Computer systems awakened. Sealed doors opened with the hiss of hydraulics that had not moved in generations. Admiral Chen Zhang stood in the command center, watching screens light up one by one. He was 73 years old, but his body was enhanced with technology that kept him as capable as a man half his age. He had spent his entire career preparing for a day he hoped would never come. That day had arrived. Status report, he said calmly. His staff moved quickly, their training kicking in despite the fact that most of them had never actually expected to use it. Military installations across all human colonies are coming online. One officer reported. Stealth protocols are being disabled. Full activation will be complete in 6 hours. Fleet status? Chen asked. 68 capital ships ready for deployment. 372 support vessels. All crews reporting at full readiness, Chen nodded. The numbers were good. Better than good. They were overwhelming. For 200 years, humanity had maintained what the rest of the galaxy believed was a small merchant fleet and some basic defense satellites. What they did not know was that every single human-built station, every orbital platform, every deep space research facility had a dual purpose. Humanity had not abandoned war. They had simply hidden it. The terraforming equipment that had made humanity famous across the galaxy, those massive fusion torches that could turn a frozen moon into a paradise, they could also be used to crack a planet's crust. The deep space mining drones that operated in asteroid fields, perfect for accelerating asteroids to relativistic speeds and turning them into weapons. The cargo haulers that moved goods between human colonies. Every single one had concealed weapon bays and military-grade reactors. Humanity had learned a hard lesson 300 years ago, during the colonial wars that nearly destroyed their species. They learned that peace was precious, worth fighting for, worth dying for. But they also learned that peace could only be maintained by those strong enough to enforce it. So they had prepared. They had built. They had trained, and they had waited, hoping they would never need any of it. Now the waiting was over. Send a message to all human colonies, Chen ordered. Implement Protocol Ares. All civilians are to be evacuated to core worlds within 48 hours. All military personnel report to assigned stations. All ships prepare for combat operations. Across human space, the transformation began. Mining stations revealed hidden weapons arrays. Research vessels dropped their disguises to show their true nature as warships. Orbital platforms that had processed ore for decades reconfigured themselves into defensive fortresses. And the ships that had been disguised as simple cargo haulers began their transformation. Armor plating deployed, weapon systems activated, stealth fields powered up. In a matter of hours, humanity went from having the weakest military presence in the galaxy to possessing the most advanced fleet in known space. Elena received her new assignment while she was still returning from the Concordat Council, a priority message encoded with military protocols she had learned in academy, but never expected to use. She was being promoted from commander of a diplomatic vessel to captain of the RSS Retribution, a warship that had been disguised as the cargo hauler Peaceful Endeavor for the past 150 years. When her shuttle docked with the Retribution, Elena barely recognized it. Gone was the plain gray hull of a merchant ship. Now it bristled with weapons and sensor arrays. Its engines, previously hidden, now glowed with barely contained power. The crew had changed too. Her diplomatic staff had been replaced with military personnel, though many faces were familiar. Marcus Chen was still her first officer, but now he wore the black uniform of the Human Defense Fleet instead of the blue of the Diplomatic Corps. "Captain on deck," he said as she entered the bridge. The bridge looked nothing like it had before. Multiple weapon control stations. Tactical displays. Advanced navigation systems designed for combat maneuvers. "Status?" Elena asked, settling into the captain's chair. "All systems green," Marcus replied. "Weapons charged and ready. Stealth systems operating at full capacity. We have quantum entanglement communication with Fleet Command. Crew is at battle stations." Elena nodded and opened a fleet-wide channel. Across human space, hundreds of ships received her transmission. This is Captain Elena Vasquez to all fleet elements. You know why we are here. You know what happened at New Terra. 400,000 of our people were murdered while the galaxy watched and did nothing. The Concordat had the opportunity to deliver justice. They chose not to, so we will deliver it ourselves. She paused, looking at the tactical display showing human ships throughout the sector. We are not conquerors, she continued. We are not murderers. We will not become the monsters we fight against. Our targets are military only. No civilian casualties. No war crimes. We will show the galaxy that it is possible to be both powerful and principled. We will show them that humanity fights only when we must. But when we do, we fight with honor. On her display, she saw the acknowledgments coming in from ship after ship. Thousands of people trained for a war they hoped would never come, now ready to fight. All ship, she said. Set course for Kepler 442. It is time to show the Vrax that we remember how to fight. Kepler 442 was a forward military base for the Vrax Dominion. It had been established 30 years ago in disputed space, a clear violation of Concordat law that had been ignored by the Council. The base controlled 3 star systems and served as a staging area for Vrax expansion. The Vrax stationed there believed they were untouchable. They had the most powerful fleet in the region. Their shields were state-of-the-art. Their weapons could level cities. They never saw the human fleet coming. The Retribution and 20 other human warships appeared in the system using jump drives that made no detectable signature. They dropped their stealth fields simultaneously, appearing like ghosts made solid. The Vrax base commander barely had time to sound the alarm before the human ships opened fire. It was not like the battles of old Earth, where ships circled each other trading shots for hours. Human weapons had advanced far beyond what the galaxy knew. Particle beams that moved at the speed of light. Quantum torpedoes that could phase through shields. Kinetic missiles that hit with the force of small nuclear weapons. The Vrax shields fell in the first minute. Their weapons platforms were destroyed in the second. By the 5th minute, their ships were burning wrecks drifting in space. Elena watched the tactical display, her face expressionless. She felt no joy in the destruction. No satisfaction. Only a cold certainty that this was necessary. Scan for survivors, she ordered. Any escape pods are to be recovered and crews taken prisoner. We will treat them according to the laws of war, even if they did not extend the same courtesy to us. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted 17 minutes from first shot to final surrender. Not a single human ship was damaged. The Vrax base at Kepler 442, one of their strongest military installations, had been completely neutralized. Elena broadcast a message on all frequencies, knowing it would reach every corner of the galaxy within hours. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Human Defense Fleet. We have neutralized the illegal Vrax base at Kepler 442. This is our response to the massacre. At New Terra, this is our justice. Any species that harbors, aids, or supports the Vrax military will be considered an enemy of humanity. Any attack on human civilians will be met with overwhelming force. We did not want this war, but we will finish it. She closed the channel and looked at her crew. They were watching her, waiting for guidance. She saw fear in some eyes, doubt in others, but also determination. They understood what was at stake. Set course for home, she said quietly. This is just the beginning. Across the galaxy, species that had dismissed humanity as weak and harmless watched the footage from Kepler 442 with growing concern. The peaceful ones, they had called them. The traitors. The diplomats, they had been wrong. So very wrong. The fire that humanity had buried for 2 centuries had awakened, and it burned brighter than anyone had imagined possible. The news of Kepler 442 spread through the galaxy like a shockwave. Within hours, every government, every military command, every news network was analyzing the footage. The humans, who everyone had dismissed as weak merchants and farmers, had destroyed a major Vrax military installation in less than 20 minutes. The Vrax Supreme Regent called an emergency session of his war council. Around the massive stone table sat his generals, all battle-hardened warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds. This is unacceptable, the Supreme Regent growled. The humans have humiliated us. They must be crushed immediately and completely. How could they have hidden such military capability? General Krath, commander of the Vrax Third Fleet, pulled up tactical displays. Our intelligence severely underestimated them. Their ships use stealth technology we cannot detect. Their weapons are more advanced than anything we have encountered, and they have more ships than we thought possible. Then we call upon the Concordat, the Supreme Regent said. We invoke the Mutual Defense Clause. The humans attacked us without provocation. The other species must help us. But when the Varax made their appeal to the Concordat Council, they found the response less than helpful. The Luminar Collective pointed out that the Kepler 442 base had been established illegally. The Kryn noted that the humans had only attacked military targets. Other species, remembering how the Vrax had treated them over the years, were suspiciously quiet. The Vrax were on their own. Over the next 3 months, humanity demonstrated a style of warfare the galaxy had never seen. They did not fight like the Vrax, with massive fleets clashing in open battle. They did not fight like the Kryn, overwhelming enemies with numbers. Instead, they fought with precision, intelligence, and terrifying effectiveness. Vrax supply convoys disappeared without a trace. Their cargo ships pulled out of warp by human gravity mines and captured by boarding parties. Military installations found their communications jammed, their sensors blind. Just before human ships appeared and struck with surgical precision, Elena commanded the retribution through a dozen engagements. Each time her orders were the same. Neutralize military targets. Take prisoners when possible. Do not harm civilians. Follow the rules of war even when the enemy does not. Not everyone agreed with this approach. After they captured a Vrax destroyer whose crew had participated in the New Terra massacre, some of her officers wanted revenge. Captain, Lieutenant Sarah Kim said during a private meeting, these prisoners murdered children. They laughed while they did it. We have verified their identity through their own ship logs. Why are we treating them humanely? Elena looked at the young officer with understanding. She felt the same anger, the same desire for revenge. Because if we become like them, then what are we fighting for? She replied. We did not start this war to become monsters. We started it to show that there is a better way. These prisoners will face trial. They will be punished, but we will not torture them. We will not execute them without due process. That is what separates us from the Vrax. The Kryn swarms made their move in the 4th month of the war. Their hive queens calculated that humanity was distracted by the Vrax conflict and vulnerable. A massive fleet of hive ships entered human space from the eastern sectors, intending to absorb several outlying colonies. It was a fatal miscalculation. The Kryn fought with tactics that had conquered 100 worlds. They swarmed their enemies, overwhelming them with sheer numbers and coordinated attacks. But human weapons had been designed with exactly this type of enemy in mind. Quantum torpedoes that could track and eliminate multiple targets simultaneously. Automated defense drones that matched the Kryn swarm for swarm. And most devastating of all, the resonance weapons that could disrupt the neural link binding Kryn hive minds together. The Kryn fleet dissolved into chaos as their coordination failed. Individual ships scattered, unable to function without their collective consciousness. The human fleet picked them off methodically. Admiral Chen watched from his command center as the Kryn retreat turned into a rout. He opened a channel to the surviving hive ships. This is Admiral Chen Zhang to all Kryn vessels. Surrender and you will be allowed to return to your territory unharmed. Continue fighting and we will destroy you. You have 2 minutes to decide. The Kryn queens, for the first time in their long history, chose survival over conquest. The surrender was accepted. The Kryn were escorted back to their borders and warned never to enter human space again. News of the Kryn defeat shocked the galaxy. 2 of the 3 major powers had challenged humanity, and both had been beaten. Only the Luminar Collective remained neutral, watching and calculating. But the humans were not content to simply defend. They began demonstrating capabilities that bordered on the terrifying. In the Outer Rim, where pirates had operated freely for decades, human ships began hunting them down with relentless efficiency. They used psychological warfare, broadcasting footage of pirate ships being destroyed to other pirate crews. The message was clear. There was nowhere to hide. On the Varax homeworld, the Supreme Regent grew increasingly desperate. His fleets were being destroyed faster than they could be rebuilt. His supply lines were cut. His territory was shrinking. In a final gambit, he ordered his forces to target human civilian populations. If he could not win militarily, he would make the cost of war too high for humanity to bear. It was the worst mistake he could have made. The human response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 24 hours of the first Virax attack on a civilian target, the human fleet appeared in orbit around the Virax homeworld itself. Admiral Chen broadcast a message on all frequencies, knowing the entire galaxy was watching. This is Admiral Chen Zhang of the Human Defense Fleet. The Virax Dominion has repeatedly violated the laws of war by targeting civilian populations. We have exhausted all attempts at proportional response. We now demonstrate the full extent of human capability. In orbit around the Virax homeworld were 17 defensive stations, each one capable of destroying a capital ship. Hundreds of defense satellites, thousands of automated weapons platforms. It was supposed to be the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. The human fleet opened fire with relativistic kill vehicles. Asteroids accelerated to a significant fraction of the speed of light, each one carrying the kinetic energy of a massive nuclear weapon. The Virax defenses tried to respond, but the projectiles were too fast, too numerous. Within minutes, every orbital defense station was destroyed. Every weapons platform was reduced to debris. The Virax homeworld was completely defenseless. Admiral Chen opened another channel, this time directed at the Supreme Regent. Your defenses are gone. Your fleet is scattered. Your empire is defeated. But we will not bombard your world. We will not kill your civilians. We could end your species right now, but we choose not to. That is the difference between us. That is why we will win. He paused, letting his words sink in. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. The Supreme Regent will stand trial for war crimes. Your military will be disarmed. Your territory will be placed under concordant oversight. Refuse and we will take these actions by force. The choice is yours, but the outcome is inevitable. In his palace, the Supreme Regent looked at the tactical displays showing human ships surrounding his world. He looked at his generals, seeing defeat in their eyes. He looked at his own claws, which had torn apart so many enemies over his long life. And for the first time, he understood fear. The surrender came 53 minutes later. Across the galaxy, 100 species watched in stunned silence as the mighty Virax Dominion fell. The Supreme Regent was taken into custody by human forces. His generals were arrested. The Virax military machine that had terrorized half the galaxy for centuries simply ceased to exist. And still, the humans held their fire. They could have taken revenge for New Terra 1,000 times over. They could have done to the Virax what the Virax had done to countless others, but they did not. Elena stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the Virax homeworld through the view screen. She thought about the survivors of New Terra, about the 400,000 dead, about all the rage and grief that had brought them to this moment. Marcus approached her quietly. Captain, the crew is asking, after everything they did, after New Terra, why are we showing them mercy? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to face her crew, all of them watching her, waiting for an answer. Because, she said, if we kill them all, we become them. If we show no mercy, we are no better than they are. Yes, they deserve punishment. Yes, they deserve justice, but not genocide, not extermination. We fight to protect life, not to destroy it. That is what makes us different. That is what makes us human. She looked back at the planet below. We will rebuild this galaxy, she said quietly, but we will rebuild it right, with laws that protect everyone, with justice that applies to all. We have shown them we can fight. Now we show them we can also forgive. The war was over. But the harder work of peace was just beginning. The trial of Supreme Regent Vekar lasted 3 months. It was held on a neutral world, broadcast across every corner of the galaxy. Species from 100 worlds watched as the mighty ruler who had terrorized them for so long sat in chains before human judges. Elena attended every day of the trial. She listened to the evidence, the recordings of attacks on civilian populations, the testimony of survivors from dozens of worlds, the orders Vekar had given in his own words to exterminate entire colonies. When the verdict came, it was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. War crimes. Crimes against sentient beings. Genocide. The sentence, however, surprised many. Not death, life imprisonment. Vekar rose from his seat, his chains rattling. He looked at the human judge with something like confusion in his ancient eyes. You have defeated me, he said. You have destroyed my empire. You have the power to end my life. Why do you not use it? The judge, an elderly woman named Sarah Martinez who had lost her own family at New Terra, looked at him steadily. Because, she said, we are not executioners. You will spend the rest of your life thinking about what you have done. You will live with your guilt. And perhaps in time you will understand why mercy is not weakness. The trial ended. Vecker was taken to a secure facility where he would spend the remainder of his days. But the work of rebuilding was only beginning. The Galactic Concordat Council convened for the first time since the war ended. The atmosphere was tense. Humanity had proven they were the strongest military power in known space. What would they do with that power? Admiral Chen stood in the speaker's circle, the same place where Elena had stood months ago seeking justice and finding none. Now every delegate listened carefully to his words. "We did not want this war," Chen said. "We chose peace 200 years ago. We buried our weapons and our anger because we learned that strength without wisdom leads only to destruction. But when the galaxy failed to protect the innocent, when law became a tool of the powerful rather than the weak, we had no choice but to act." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from 100 worlds. "Now we propose a new system. One that actually works. The Terra Accords. The terms were simple but revolutionary. All species would have equal representation in a reformed council. Decisions about war and peace would require a supermajority. Most importantly, there would be an independent peacekeeping force commanded by rotating species, responsible for enforcing galactic law, and humanity would guarantee it. They would maintain their military, keep their weapons ready, but use them only to defend the innocent and enforce the law. They would be the guardians of the new order. The Luminar collective representative, her crystalline form shimmering in the chamber lights, spoke for the first time. "The mathematics are sound," she said. "This system creates incentives for cooperation rather than conquest. But it requires trust. Why should we trust humanity with such power?" Chen nodded. "Because we could have destroyed the Vrax homeworld and we did not. We could have taken their territory for ourselves and we did not. We could have made ourselves rulers of the galaxy and we chose not to. We want peace, not empire. But we will enforce that peace if we must." The vote took 2 weeks. Species debated, calculated, considered. In the end, the Terra Accords were adopted by a vote of 87 to 13. A new galactic order was born. The former Vrax territories were placed under temporary Concordat administration. War reparations were established not just for New Terra, but for every world the Vrax had harmed. The funds would go to rebuilding, to healing, to making whole what had been broken. Elena was offered a position as the first commander of the peacekeeping fleet. She considered it carefully. Part of her wanted to return to civilian life, to never fight again. But she knew that peace required constant vigilance. She accepted on one condition. She would serve for 5 years and then retire, and her successor would not be human. The peacekeeping force must truly represent all species, not just humanity. 2 years after the war ended, Elena returned to New Terra. The colony had been rebuilt. New buildings rose where the old ones had fallen. The farms were green again, the fields full of growing crops. A memorial had been constructed in the center of the new capital. 400,000 names carved into black stone, each one a person, each one a life that had been stolen. Elena walked through the memorial gardens in the evening light. She read the names: children, parents, grandparents, people who had done nothing wrong except try to build a life on a distant world. As she stood there, she heard voices, children playing in the park beyond the memorial, laughing, running, living. An elderly man approached her. She recognized him as one of the survivors she had pulled from the rubble on that terrible day. "Commander Vasquez," he said. "Or should I say Fleet Commander now?" "Elena is fine," she said softly. They stood together in silence for a moment, listening to the children play. "Was it worth it?" he asked finally. "The war." "All the death. Was it worth it?" Elena thought carefully before answering. "Nothing could ever be worth what happened here," she said. "Nothing could make up for these losses. But we did what we had to do. We showed the galaxy that there are consequences for evil, that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak. That peace is not the absence of strength, but the careful application of it." The old man nodded slowly. He looked at the memorial, then at the playing children. "My grandchildren died here," he said. "But now I see other children playing, safe, protected. Maybe that is enough. Maybe that is what we fought for." 3 years later, Elena stood in her final ceremony as fleet commander. She was passing command to Admiral Kresh. a Luminar officer known for her wisdom and fairness. The transition was smooth. The peacekeeping fleet had proven itself effective, maintaining order across a dozen sectors. In her final address, Elena spoke to representatives from across the galaxy. 5 years ago, we went to war because we had to, because justice had failed and innocents were dying. We showed the galaxy that humanity remembers how to fight, but more importantly, we showed that we remember when to stop fighting. She paused, looking out at the assembled crowd. The greatest test of power is not in taking it, but in giving it up. Today I pass command to Admiral Kresh. Tomorrow I return to civilian life. Because the true measure of a civilization is not how well it wages war, but how completely it embraces peace when war is done. Elena retired to New Terra. She bought a small farm on the edge of the colony, where she could see the memorial in the distance but also watch new life growing. She taught at the local school, sharing her experiences with young people who had only known peace. One day, 5 years after the war, a young Vrax came to her farm. He was barely an adult, his scales still showing the bright colors of youth. He stood at her door, nervous, afraid. "I'm sorry to disturb you," he said in halting human language. "My name is Kelk. I am a student of history. I wanted to ask you something." Elena invited him in. They sat in her kitchen drinking tea. "What is your question?" she asked. The young Vrax looked down at his claws. "In my studies, I learned what my people did. At New Terra and other places. The cruelty, the murder, and I learned how humanity responded. You destroyed our military, captured our leaders. You could have killed us all." He looked up at her with eyes full of confusion. "Why did you spare us?" he asked. "After everything we did, why?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. She thought about New Terra, about the memorial with its 400,000 names, about all the anger and grief and rage that had driven humanity to war. And she thought about the choice they had made. The choice to remember who they wanted to be, not who they could have become. "Because," she said finally, "we fought to stop evil, not to become it. We fought to protect life, not to destroy it. Your leaders committed terrible crimes. They were punished. But you, young one, you did nothing. Your generation did nothing. Why should you die for the sins of your elders?" She stood and walked to the window, looking out at her fields. "Humanity learned something a long time ago," she continued. "We learned that the cycle of violence only ends when someone chooses to end it. Yes, we could have exterminated the Vrax, but then someone else would seek revenge on us, and the killing would never stop." She turned back to the young Vrax. "We spared your people because we believe in a better future, one where justice matters more than revenge, where mercy is a strength, not a weakness, where all species can live together in peace, not because they fear destruction, but because they choose cooperation." The young Vrax was silent, processing her words. "I do not know if my people deserve such mercy," he said quietly. "Perhaps not," Elena replied, "but your children will, and their children after them. We did not spare the Vrax for your past. We spared you for your future." The young Vrax left with tears in his eyes, understanding for the first time the true meaning of mercy. That evening, Elena sat on her porch and watched the sunset. In the distance she could see the memorial, its black stone gleaming in the fading light, and beyond it she could see the lights of the city coming on one by one, life continuing, growing, building. The flames that had awakened from their slumber were banked once more. Not extinguished. Never extinguished. Humanity would always remember how to fight, would always maintain the capacity for war. But they would fight only when they must. They would show force only when mercy failed. And they would always remember that the true measure of strength was knowing when not to use it. The galaxy had crossed a line, and humanity had shown them the consequences. But more importantly, they had shown them the path forward. A path built not on fear, but on hope. Not on revenge, but on justice. Not on the ashes of the defeated, but on the promise of a better tomorrow. And in that promise perhaps lay the greatest victory of all.